to the Phillip Stark Show podcast. This segment is called the DIY Dirt, in which we discuss how to succeed as a DIY or do-it-yourself artist. Today, our guest is Miss Alex White. Miss Alex White is a founding member of the band White Mystery, along with her brother, Francis Scott Key White. This duo of rock and roll siblings demands your attention, not only because of their, as you can see, red hair, but their high energy sound and powerful live shows. And of course, their great branding, great album covers, great promotional graphics. You have the style and the look, all of it. Alex manages the band. She has booked over 1,000 shows worldwide, getting on the bill with the likes of Patti Smith, The Stooges, and other illustrious acts. She's also closed sponsorship deals with Orange Amplifiers and Levi's Jeans. So Alex, without a doubt, you are a DIY success story, and it is a pleasure to have you on the show. How are you?
Thank you for having me, Phillip, and I have a lot of respect for you and your musicianship too.
Thank you very much. So tell me, Alex, we're just going to jump right into this. When and how did you start playing music? Talk a bit about your personal music journey. Did Chicago play a bit in that?
I grew up loving the golden oldies. I listened to the oldies on the radio, you know, those one-hit wonders like Travelin' Man and the Beach Boys and all sorts of stuff really inspired me. And when I was in fourth grade and I heard The Who for the first time, I knew that I had to pick up the electric guitar and start rocking like Pete Townsend. Bob O'Reilly specifically was a song that really blew my mind at that tender age. And I started playing guitar and started jamming with people right away. So I learned how to play by playing with other people. And I'm born and raised here in the city of Chicago. And, you know, in the late 90s and mid 90s, we had DIY shows, basement shows, backyard shows, Chicago Park District shows, and we had our little punk scene, our teenage punk scene that transformed into a career one day, and I would have never guessed that.
Yeah, that's pretty cool coming from a big city. A lot of people listening come from small towns and they're trying to do like the DIY thing, but coming from a big city has a lot of advantages. Were there any local influences that helped develop your career?
So many local influences. We had the Fireside Bowl, which was like the CBGBs of Chicago, you know, where I got to see Man or Astro Man and let's see, so many great bands, you know, Bright Eyes and just ska, of course, because it was the 90s. And a lot of the people who influenced me at that time, you know, like the Mooney Suzuki and the Donnas and bands like that are friends of mine now because that's just the way that music is. You know, sometimes your idols become your friends because we just have a mutual respect for each other.
Cool. So you're in high school in the United States. You can go to all ages shows. So you're going out and you're meeting these people, and you get that DIY bug very early because you decide to launch your own record label. Like, what year was that? How old were you, and how'd that come about?
Yeah. So, gosh, I was probably a senior in high school. I graduated high school early and started playing in a duo called Miss Alex White and Chris Playboy. And that was probably 2003 or so, early 2000s. And, you know, I had been collecting 45s at that time. I worked at Lori's Planet of Sound record store, and 45s were, you know, 10 cents and CDs were $20. So guess which ones, you know, I was collecting, obviously the vinyl because it was cheaper, and fell in love with records and realized, you know, and this was a very early internet kind of time still. There was MySpace, but it was still, you know, early in that whole kind of e-commerce process. We realized that there was United Record Pressing that was still pressing vinyl in Nashville, Tennessee. So we filled out the paper form and threw up a one-page website and a PayPal button, and all of a sudden we had a record label that day.
Wow. Is this, when you say we, is this you and your brother?
So at that time, I was in a band with my best friend whose name was Chris Sadoff, and we called him Chris Playboy because he worked at Playboy. Their headquarters was here in Chicago. And he was my best bud, you know, partied. We shot BB guns in his backyard, shot rats and soda cans, and started this record label, played a ton of shows. and he got hit by a car and killed
Uh,
on Valentine's Day. And at that time, I thought that I would never play music again because of the impact that it had on me. And Larry Hardy from In the Red Records had heard that 45 that we put out together, and he said, "You got to keep playing music, and I will put your full length record out." So I started playing with this pretty notorious band from Detroit called the Clone Defects.
mhm.
They were my backing band. We put out a bunch of full length records on In the Red and toured Europe for the first time. You know, I was in college at that point. And all the while, my brother Francis, who's an amazing drummer, is just sitting at home in Chicago, twiddling his thumbs. And it was in 2008 where we said, you know, it's destiny. We should be playing together.
Now, when you launched this, started the band with your brother, I've heard, I think you actually might have told me this because I know you from when you played in Madrid and my band opened for you. And I think you told me, let's confirm if it's true, that you and your brother made a deal to just have the band for a series of years, 10 years, with some rules attached to it. Can you tell me a bit about that?
So I knew from my previous experiences in bands that we had to create parameters for this one to really succeed, right? So I had been in a band called Hot Machines with this guy who was also in the Ponies, and we were like, you know, selling out our shows, and it was crazy. But he ended up at a crossroads where he had to pick between his two bands. And I realized that for White Mystery, we had to commit singularly to that band, nothing else. Otherwise, we would be presented with, you know, inevitably it's going to be like, well, which show do I play, you know, on a Friday night? There's only so many Friday nights in one year, right? So we didn't want to have to ever choose between White Mystery and anything else. There was so many people who told me that there was no way we would ever succeed. I don't think there was anyone who was really encouraging us beyond each other and maybe like our, you know, a couple close friends, but mostly like our mom and this photographer, Paul Natkin, who is a legendary photographer. He shot, you know, Aretha Franklin, went on tour with the Stones and stuff. And he was the person, he shot Cream magazine. He was a friend of my mom's, also a photographer. And he sat down with me and he was like, "Why aren't you a professional musician?" And I was like, gosh, is that possible even? Is that like a career track? I had never put two and two together. It was just a passion for me.
You know, I understand that you were going to college also for an MBA at this time.
I am now. So I went to DePaul for entrepreneurial studies and business when I had started that record label following it. I didn't know what entrepreneurship was. I had never heard of that term. And my mom said, "You know what you're doing with this independent record label and shipping records all around the world? You know that's called entrepreneurship, right?" And I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." So went to school for that, and now, you know, flash forward almost 15 years, and I'm back in school getting my MBA. And I guest teach music business at University of Illinois Chicago. I had a column for Riot Fest on how to succeed as a DIY musician. And you know, it's a passion of mine is to let people know that they can pursue music professionally and succeed, because so many had told me that it would be impossible, and I'm here to prove that it's not.
So it wasn't the studying business that kind of influenced your music career. You were already, you just had it in the DNA.
And both of my parents are self-employed or have been most of my life. So I knew that, you know, a career is a struggle. It's not something that's handed to you. So I was 100% open to having to work really hard to make it happen.
So now it's like you're in college. White Mystery has been established.
Not
You,
yet.
not yet. Okay.
I graduated college in 2004. I toured with Miss Alex White and the Red Orchestra, the band that I was in on In the Red. I helped build $1 million button company. And then I started doing music full time with my brother. We started the band in 2008, White Mystery, and then started doing it full time in 2010.
Full time with your agreement that it's going to be 10 years commitment and all that stuff.
We had the agreement in 2008, but it takes time to be able to get to that point where you can quit your day job, right? It requires a lot of saving and that kind of thing. So it wasn't like April 20th, 2008, we were full time. It took us 2 years to get to that point.
And was it pretty easy to get your brother to jump on board with this? Like, what were all the rules here? Like, if you're gonna be in the band, it's gonna be this, that.
Yeah, so the rules were to stay 100% independent, so never to sign away any rights to our music or image or publishing or anything like that. So that was like number one, remain independent fully. And that translated into, like our love lives as well. It's like stay independent so that when you're gone, you're not doing a disservice to someone that might be wonderful by not being for them, being there for them emotionally or even, geographically. So, and we also didn't cut our hair in that period of time.
So no relationships, no cutting hair, just music. And he was like, "Yeah, of course, sis, let's do it. No
Let's do
problem."
it. Yeah, let's do it. And he was, the best person in the world to have been able to be on that journey with, because we were so much on the same level in terms of musically being the number one, and because our strengths lent to each other. So Fran drove all of those tens of thousands of miles. I think our peak was like 40,000 miles in one year that he drove single handedly. And then I would do the booking. And for instance, Francis visualized our logo, that superimposed W and M, but then I designed it, so it was like a nice yin yang of skills to make the band work.
Well, let's talk more about those skills and all the stuff you're doing. Obviously, you and your brother do all the graphic design together. You guys have awesome promotions on social networks and stuff. I'm always seeing you doing something. But do you also record the music yourself? Are you a producer, or does he have a part in that? Like, and the music videos and everything that, and the booking of the shows, all that DIY stuff. So just to summarize, recording music videos, booking your shows. How does that work for you to doing that yourselves?
Right. So, DIY, I've said this before, but it's also like DIT, which is do it together. There's so many people involved in making White Mystery a success. It does take a village or a community. So we've mentored 25 students in the last 10 years who have interned for us. Keeping the website updated, do you think I'm, constantly updating all of those shows? We have a 75 show tour. Do you think I can book them and post all of those details in one day? No. It took a whole team of people to be able to accomplish the things that we did, but it was an independent team that we guided. We didn't want to be a name on a roster, alphabetized.
That's an amazing idea. I don't think many bands think about getting interns. But if you have a good presence and a good brand and you're putting out stuff, because you guys put out stuff like all the time. I'm
Yeah.
looking on Spotify right here. It's like 2018, 2017, 2000 endless array of albums. I guess that's what gets interns. Is that why they're interested, because they see you're doing stuff and they want to be part of it?
Definitely being active helps, and having opportunities where, last year we produced festivals for like the Chicago Loop Alliance in downtown Chicago. And I'm able to like actually pay them to do production work and rock and roll market and that kind of thing. But I think on a certain level, they become interested because they're like, wow, brother sister band here in Chicago, just touring the world and partying professionally. I'm intrigued by that. I think most 18, 19, and 20-year-olds are drawn in. And also, like I said, so many people say that you're never going to succeed in this business. And when you prove them wrong, I think that you do develop a following.
Yeah, and you develop respect and admiration, I'm sure, from all of them. So give us a bit of an idea of what it's like, touring the world nonstop with a sibling and not killing each other, and doing things right, keeping success, keeping the goal there, in your vision, so you don't mess it all up.
Well, I think that that vision and that mission to go where no band has gone before really kept us glued together, and it helped us with our decision making very much. So if we were presented with a decision and it didn't hit all of our points, it was just easy to say no or to say yes, or it was a negotiating point. And as far as partying goes, yeah, I mean, we've met people like you and so many so many people where like pretty much any city in the world I have
Are you trying to say
friends.
that I party?
Well, I mean, it's Madrid. It's
I stay home and read books on the weekends.
well, Wurlitzer Ballroom is like, that's where magic happens.
The Wurlitzer Ballroom is like the punk rock reference for Spain. Great place to go. So anyway,
Yeah. And but Fran and I, we were pretty much on the same wavelength where it's like we're partying now. Now we're gonna take a nap. Let's go get dinner. That's kind of the benefit of being siblings is that you're so in tune with each other. And gosh, I have stories upon stories upon stories. And I wish I had time to sit down and write a book about just like the
yeah.
crazy shit that we've seen and
We'll have to
done.
do a longer podcast with just the Miss Alex White's stories because today you have a heart out in
7 minutes.
7 minutes. Can I commit you right now to do a part two at
Sure.
some point? There we go. So let's talk about sacrifices real quick.
Oh boy.
Just tell me about the sacrifices you had to make. It could be like economically, emotionally, to do this thing that you're doing and that you've done for so many years.
Well, the human brain is really interesting because so much of maybe the pain has washed away, after all of these years, in terms of, we didn't buy new clothes or new shoes or eat out for, gosh, first 5 years. And we slept on strangers' floors, and I'm really allergic to cats, and we would stay at someone's house with cats because you're in Fargo, North Dakota, and you don't know anyone else. And that's the one person who's willing to put you up, so not feeling 100% and losing your voice. And my poor brother just driving for hours and hours and on end. And sometimes we would be on the road and we would see all of our friends back in Chicago or partying. And we're like, oh man, they're probably having so much fun. And we're driving through like a tornado in Mississippi. But at the same time, I think that the experiences that we had just heavily outweighed all of that pain and all of the adventures. Like, speaking of tornadoes, we drove through one in Mississippi on our way to play with Peaches on Halloween in New Orleans at this really notorious venue called One Eyed Jack's.
Wow.
And it was like 8 hours long of just lightning and zero visibility. And my brother just nerves of steel grinding through it. And we finally came out the other side of just, the torrential rain and all the emergency warnings where it's like, pull over. But it's like, what are you going to do?
Pull over
When you
where?
pull over, yeah, first of all, you can't see anything. Secondly, someone might plow into the back of your car. It's the worst advice ever. And we came out the other end of this tornado, and it looked like all of the trees had gone through wood chippers. Like they were just piles of dust. And we were like, that could have been us. But then we played, a sold out show with Quintron and Miss Pussycat and Peaches, and people were swinging from the rafters. And it was just and it was during Voodoo Fest, in New Orleans. So it was just the most balls out crazy experience. And it was traumatizing actually, because when I see a storm coming, I'm like, I'm staying home now that I have the choice. But when you're on the road, you don't have that choice. You have to keep going.
It's the passion, isn't it? You're doing it all for that moment. Just that moment when you get there and the crowd. Like, what's your favorite part of the show? Like, do you just love it when the people get into it? Because you're a band that people can get into. I mean, you're like a danceable sort of rock and roll band.
I'm definitely like in my head when I'm playing, you know, like I'm in my head. And I think that the audience part is a wonderful byproduct of playing a show, but I'm definitely thinking and feeling and nailing riffs in my brain and aware of my voice and my surroundings and what's next,
Yeah.
what song is next, because we don't make set lists or anything like that.
I think that's called being in the zone.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
got
I'm
it.
definitely, that's where I'm at when I'm performing.
That makes it all worthwhile. So, really quickly, I know I have you for a short amount of time. Let's see if we can give the most value. Just think about value to any DIY musicians, artists watching this right now. Practical stuff, real quick. Band revenue sources.
I think that having diverse revenue streams is one of the most important parts to succeeding as a independent musician, so that when you're not on tour, you're mail ordering records. When you're not mail ordering records, hopefully you're trying to license your music to music supervisors, which is, it's challenging. And I think that, so having multiple, choices in how you make money, it helps a lot, especially now since we can't tour. So hopefully you've got something else going on, whether you're like selling art online or whatever. I think that the second piece of advice I would say is that you do you. My path is not something that you want to just replicate and expect success from. You can get a manager, get a booking agent, do whatever it is that fits your personality and your goals that'll help you achieve your goals. So, you can do every single thing that I did and you're going to have a totally different outcome. So you got to follow your own dreams and figure out the path to achieving them.
Like an entrepreneur, figure out your strong points and delegate the rest, perhaps to interns, or if you can get some money together and you really believe in yourself, there's nothing wrong with investing in yourself as well. To get in contact with a music supervisor, is that something you can do yourself?
For instance, for Orange Amps, we literally emailed their general contact email on their website and said, hey, you guys are awesome. Your logo is a redheaded man and a redheaded woman on a crest. That's literally who we are. We tour constantly and are in dire need of an amplifier. What do you think about that? And they replied to us. So, it is possible to land stuff for yourself when it makes sense. And if you have a provocative story.
You have to have a good narrative, and if it makes sense, don't be afraid to send an email. You don't think it's stupid.
That's how we got on late night television. We emailed the Carson Daly Show. It wasn't because we had a manager or an in with them. We cold emailed them. But I think that, I guess, a practical piece of advice is keep those emails short.
Mm-hmm.
I work on a 3-line email system to stay very consistent. I always have a exclamation, a statement, and a who, what, when, or where question to end my email. And it helps me get through the volume of communication that I have. Sometimes I used to have 120 emails, but now that I run this media company at Do 312, I get sometimes 250 emails in a day. So having a system, and some of them are very complicated, but having a system and ending with a qualitative question of who, what, when, or why is a really good way of avoiding a no in music.
That is some solid advice. Is there anything unusual or creative or innovative ideas for people out there that are something maybe you thought about but haven't tried yet yourself? And then anything that you might want to answer that I maybe forgot to ask you, or a question you would have preferred to be asked?
Use this time to innovate your craft and improve your craft, and to stay in touch with people who are important to you, and follow up with the people who had booked you before to check in on them and see how they're doing. Because I know that this is a very difficult time for booking agents and promoters due to COVID-19 and all the venues being closed. So leverage this time to strengthen your community.
Well, how you doing? Talking about that.
Well, I am fine. I'm healthy, so I'm very grateful for that. And I, unlike my pals who have a ton of time, I am booked all day long, all night long. And when I'm not doing that, I'm doing homework. And if I'm not doing homework, I'm trying to help somebody.
Well, that's it right there from Miss Alex White. Try to help people, check in with everybody, and let's end this with a music video. So let's go there right now.